All right, so let's talk about Simple Sam's Signature Grand. I think this is, I'll just say right up front, this is one of my favorite libraries, one of my favorite piano libraries in a long time. It's got such a wonderful sound, such a 3D sound, and great staccatos, great energy, and I've been using it a bunch. I've been playing with it every day, 4 hours. It's a problem, really. But in the process, I've also dug behind the scenes a lot. And in this video, I want to talk about some of the ways that you can tweak what's going on behind the scenes, because you've got a lot of presets. You've got a settings panel here, but it's really hiding a lot of what the plugin is doing. And I think that that's kind of a disservice to the potential for flexibility here. And I mean, if you've got this, you've got the full version of Kontakt, you can hop behind the hood here with me. You can do the same things that I'm doing, and it's not that big of a deal, but it would be lovely if they could expose some of it in the front end, whether it's an advanced settings panel or what. So this is kind of both a showing you how to tweak everything and some fun ideas for splitting out the mics, but also a suggestion to the developers that it would be really cool to open up some of this functionality. I mean, the library is $50 right now. That's incredible. I love that, and it does a lot. It's a great library. I like it. But yeah, let's talk about some of those things. So the way that the library works and the way that the presets work is they are constantly changing parameters and insert effects to produce different sounds. In some of the buses, you've got EQs. In some of the groups, you've got EQs. And those are all being adjusted by the presets, all of these insert effects like EQs, surround pan, who knows what that's doing? I'm scared to even think. Saturator, compression, inversion, stereo control, tape distortion, and a limiter. A limiter that is on every single patch. So it was bypassed there. Let me recall this library so that we can get back to the base default mode. So this first default film patch that the instrument loads up with is the most simple of all of them. It's got close mics, room mics at the same level. They're balanced out. Response is the same. Settings are pretty standard. There's some key noise, pedal noises, but not too much else happening in here. If I open up the back end, you'll see there's some EQ here. There's a couple of bumps on things like the staccatos. Jump down here to the instrument buses. Looks like that's all clean. Insert effects, all clean, except for the stereo control, which is zeroed out. It's not really doing anything. And a limiter. This is the start of some of the issues with this library. There is a limiter here with 9 dB of gain. So if I start playing something loud, watch this attenuation bar here. You can hear it. It is slamming down on some of those notes. It's not necessarily a bad quality unless you're playing a lot of rambunctious loud stuff like that. I think a bit of limiting, a bit of compression is never a bad thing on an instrument, on a sound. You'll find that professionally mixed things do all sorts of stuff like this in little bits to influence sound, or in really big ways, as some of these presets show. There are some of these presets here that are wild and sound really cool and exciting and frenetic and distorted and all that stuff. They're all mimicking styles of other pieces of music, and I think that that's amazing. But you can't get away from a little bit of nonsense. Even this default film patch has that limiter slamming down on things as you get loud. And I don't think that's too great. You can hop into the back end here, hit the little B in the top left corner, bypass it. It will be shooting over 0 dB outside of Kontakt, so I'm running in standalone, so you'll hear it clipping. Not clipping too much, though, because, again, I've bypassed this. It got rid of that 9 dB boost, so it's quieter, but it's at less risk of clipping. You can turn it down here or turn down the track in your DAW. Then you're good to go. But some of the other presets run into some other strange issues. Film New York City Feature Close is a great example of this. This is a patch that has some convolution reverb on it. It should have the limiter engaged. Actually, I disabled it. It's always enabled unless I disable it. So I've re-enabled it. I'm going to play something. Our output is at 0 dB in Kontakt. Sorry if that's a bit loud. So that's clipping a lot. Now, why is that happening? So we've got a limiter here. You'd think that that would be taking care of it. You can see the attenuation slamming down on it, but there's something else hiding here. Send effects. So the way that send effects work in Signature Grand, the first two groups here, these are the main notes, not the releases of the notes, but just the main meat of the notes. When you play the note, this is the sound you hear. They are both sending to the convolution send effects at 0 dB at unity at full power. And if I come down here and look at both of these in different presets, these get bypassed and unbypassed. So this one has this first option here. The return is at 0 dB. So these convolution reverbs are getting the signal straight from the group at 0 dB and coming back, returning at 0 dB. So what's happening is this limiter is clamping down at 0 dB, and then the convolution reverbs merge in after and make this level shoot up over 0 dB, cause a bunch of clipping if you're running it standalone, or potentially cause other issues if you're in a, clipped environment. If you're rendering things out to 24-bit or whatever, you're going to run into problems. Or if you're just playing it raw in your DAW, you're going to be like, why is this patch clipping? I thought these patches were custom made. Yeah, that's an issue. And I want to go into another issue with this as well. So the reason why I think these patches are boosted so much, like the compressor here has a 5 dB input gain. The limiter now has a nearly 10 dB input gain. What's happening, as I said above, the sends are always at 0 dB on the convolution reverbs. The returns are always at 0 dB. I think they're using the insert effects section and the compressor input gain and the limiter input gain to balance with the reverb. So if they want, quote unquote, less reverb, they're turning up the direct signal from the close in the room mics so that they're louder than the reverb, and it changes the balance. But the problem with that is, now, obviously, this patch is super loud. When you play it, it's smacking into the limiter, and even if I turn down the output here a bit so that it doesn't clip anymore, and I play something loud, you can hear how absolutely smashed that sound is. You can watch it on the attenuation. I don't know how many dB that is because it's not marked on here, but it feels like a lot. It's kind of crazy. So they're compensating for the 0 dB sends on the reverb by slamming into a limiter, and it sounds pretty nice when, you're playing lightly. And I've seen them suggest, hey, if you want to play louder, hop into the settings and turn down the velocity offset and the velocity curve. This preset even has the velocity offset turned down, so it's not going to be as loud as it normally is. And I think that that's a patch job to compensate for how much they're pushing this insert section so that it comes out and rebalances louder than the reverb. It's janky. But again, this is you can hop into the back end here and tweak all of this. I can go into the send section of these two things, turn them down to negative 9.6 dB, which is about how much the limiter is being pushed. Negative 9. Bear with me. Hop down here to the limiter, set this limiter to 0 dB. So I've kind of flipped it. I've turned down the reverb by 9. I've turned down the limiter by 9. So we should be the same character as before, just less limiting. Still getting a bit of limiting down here, but it's not as bad. But because of the way that these patches are set up and the way that the presets recall, if we go up now and recall this specific patch, let me go to another one and then go back, you'll see that the limiter is now pushed up to 9.6 dB, but our sends on the groups are still notched down. So there's a very selective set of parameters in the insert effects and the EQs and the groups that are controlled by these presets and others that aren't. So if you're like, oh, I'm going to go into the back end and I'm going to change some things and now we'll be good on all presets, it won't, because some of them don't apply. So it's janky, and I feel like they would really gain a lot by routing and setting up these things a bit differently, so that maybe the limiter input gain is linked to the send amounts or the return amounts on the reverbs or something. It's just a little weird, and it works if you're not digging into the back end, but if you are, it all breaks down. And that's the problem. You can't just go in here and turn down the limiter, because then the amount of reverb... Oops, actually, sorry. These are still set to -9. So if I set this back to default, I load up the New York feature close patch. I turn down the limiter. Now, so much reverb. Turn down the limiter more, why not? Because the convolution send effects are in a different chain than the insert instrument effects. These are not making it into this chain. This is totally separate. And that allows them to do some interesting things. It allows the reverb to be a true, like, dry send effect, which I don't think that's a bad way to set that up. You want to add distortion and stuff. You don't want the reverb slamming into all of that stuff. That's fine. But it's weird. So if there was some way to kind of remap some of that and also put in an advanced settings page that lets you tweak all of those inserts, that lets you tweak all the things that are constantly changing in the back end secretly, not really, because you can open it up and look, but you get what I'm saying. All the things that are changing when you flip through presets, that would be great. I think a lot of people would be really happy. Maybe even if it's just a button to disable the limiter or disable the tape distortion, because like this, vintage Goldberg patch, if I go in here and look at the tape gain, it's 24 dB, and I play anything louder than mezzo piano and it starts... And they've talked about this as well. These are made for specific styles, made for specific styles of playing. So if I play this patch pretty, conservatively... It's a pretty cool energy, but there's a lot about it that I like maybe. Like maybe I like the EQ on it that's dulling the sound. I like the compression on it, but I don't love all that distortion, and I want to turn that down a little bit. I can hop into the back end and change it here super easy, but it would be nice for it to be out here. Now, there's one other thing I'm going to talk about real quick, and that is separating out the close mics and the room mics. Now, let me go back to our default film preset so that we have something that doesn't have the convolution reverb enabled. So, if you want to get the close mics and room mics out separately so that you can mix them yourself, because, there's a lot of projects I've worked on where I'll be changing the balance of piano mics in a mix across the length of it. Say that one part, the piano is contextual and just adding to the orchestra. I want a lot of room mics, and I don't want too much close. But then there's a really tender part later. And I want those close mics to come out. With this setup as it is, I could do some funny stuff. I could right-click, learn MIDI CC automation, and try to control it with CC automation and MIDI clips. But traditionally, I'd love to work in the mix window with faders and volume automation, standard stuff. And hey, I'd also like to send different amount of the close mics and the room mics to my reverbs in my project, or I want to put some effects just on the close mics or the room mics. So interestingly enough, if we hop into the instrument buses screen, there are buses here for the close mics, which are on 1 and 3. 1 is the close mics main. 3 is the close mics releases, the early reflections, they call it, but it's really just all the releases. So your close mics are hiding in 1 and 3, and your room mics are hiding in 2 and 4. You can see EW mics main, EW mics ERs. Those are the room mics. And then close mics main, SH mics ERs. The naming is a little funny and a little scattered across the groups and the buses here, but don't worry about it. 1 and 3 close, 2 and 4 room. And there's some EQs on here that pop in and engage and have different settings depending on the preset that you have engaged. So in the back end, yes, the close mics are getting different EQs compared to the room mics. I think that's really interesting and lets them do some probably neat stuff with the mics. But I'd love to be able to do that myself. So I can hop in here to 1, go down to the output sections. You see right now, 1 through 4 are all going to the inserts. So all of these are going straight to the inserts. Now, if you do this, you're going to miss out on all of these insert effects. You're going to miss out on all of the fun stuff in the presets that really shapes the sound, other than maybe some EQs in these buses that recall on presets, but we'll forget about that for now. If you want to do a fully custom mix, all you need to do is 1 and 3. You're going to set to your, designated output. 2 and 4, you're going to do the same to a separate output. So then suddenly in your DAW, you can access the close mics and the room mics separately. You still get access to all of these controls. You can turn up the close mics versus the releases in here, room mics and releases in here, response, all of this stuff in here. For the most part, you can tweak and play with and get sounding how you want, feeling how you want, and then do the full mix without all of these, fun insert effects in your DAW. And that's cool. That's fine. That's dandy. But again, I'm going to come back to this. I would love if they exposed that in here, whether there's a little button here that defaults to output to inserts, and you can click that and you can send that out to a dedicated output in Kontakt so that you can access it in your DAW and you can mix everything separately. At the moment, you have to jump into the back end, dig a little bit, investigate what's going on here with these groups. This is the early releases. I can listen to them, so. And you can stumble upon that yourself. I'm making this video to teach people so they don't have to stumble, but no one would even need this video if more of this stuff was exposed on the front end. And that's really what this whole thing is about. It's about educating people who love this library but want more tweakability, but also a call to the devs. These are the things that I think are an issue, the things that I'm rubbing up against constantly, the things I'm constantly clicking this wrench for because it's driving me crazy that this preset doesn't let me tweak something I don't like about it. I mean, I get it. I get the idea of doing this. It's a $50 library. I guess $75 normally. It's on intro price right now. It's amazing. It sounds incredible. I'm going to use this so much. But I hate having to click this wrench all the time. I guess I don't hate it. Hate is a strong word. I'm a little frustrated having to click this wrench all the time. So, yeah, that's about it. Nothing too much more than that. But yeah, great library. I recommend you pick it up. I recommend you play around with it. I recommend you hit this wrench and dig around in the back because you can tweak everything freely. There's nothing hidden, but it's a little janky. See you in the next one.